All right, so we've got this board here, and you can compare it. It's similar to Rhoda's, but I add the option of going to hell if Christianity is true. That's kind of the main difference, and I make it a little more all or nothing rather than just raises the likelihood of going to heaven or raises the likelihood of going to. Well, I guess that's one of the main differences. So, all right, now what we're going to do is assess, okay, some expected utilities. And if you look at the handout, I ask, what is R's first response, which is on page 67? Okay, so you can check that page. But here's the gist that Rhoda wants you to see. Regardless of whether the better strategy is to commit to Christianity or commit to Islam, the important thing he wants to note is either of these weakly dominates doing neither. Okay, because you just kind of had to check. So um, compare committing to Christian way of life. Well, you can either get heaven, hell, or this world's goods. But naturalism is either hell, or this world's goods. So I mean, these are going to be roughly equal. Okay, and then these options are going to be roughly equal. Although Rhoda is going to think this is actually better because sorry, you actually get more out of living a religious life. But still, these two aren't going to be too far apart. Um, but this part, um, the heaven over hell, is what makes committing Christianity weakly dominate um, naturalism. So we've already learned about that. This is the previous table. But now we have an additional option, which is committing to Islam. And even with this, though, you get weak domination because these are the same, right? On the option that Christianity is true, these are the same. Sorry, everything's reversed on the camera. These are the same, but heaven and hell, that's going to be the difference, right? And then we're going to assume, I mean, these can't be too far apart because they're still in the finite realm. Okay, so what's Rhoda's first point, which is um, if you take if you care about maximizing utility, maximizing the good for yourself or others, then don't be a don't live a secular life, even if it's true that there are many religions. Uh, in fact, you do much better by committing to some religion to maximize your chances of avoiding hell and maximizing your chances of attaining heaven. All right. So, what do you think about that? It's an interesting response, but the thing Rhoda concludes is nobody should be living secularly. Now, I can think of possible responses to Rhoda's point there, but I'm going to leave that for possible remarks in the discussion board on Blackboard. Okay, so next part is okay, but then how are we supposed to assess whether we should go the Christian way or go the Islamic way? Okay, and here it seems like they're at a tie if we assume that these values are the same. And so what Rhoda does is he gives you an analogy, and I think it's a pretty good analogy. So, and here's how it's going to go. First, he uses another eccentric billionaire, and I gotta find my marker here. And what he's going to imagine a situation. We'll use a spot at the bottom of the board where you could commit to playing game A, or you could commit to playing game B. All right, so game A and game B. Okay, now if you look at the page reference, you'll see that we're going over material on page 68, and we're on the second part of the handout. For Rhoda's second response, Rhoda uses another billionaire story. What is the story? What does he want it to show? Okay, so what happens if you play game A? Okay, so look at the reading. Um, a random number is going to be drawn in game A. Okay, one of the natural numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And here's what happens. If they draw an even number, you get $1 million. So I'll just write it. If even number, then $1 million. Okay. So if an even number is drawn, then you get $1 million. Okay, what's it like with game B? Well, with game B, the way he has it, if the number is evenly divisible by 10, so if it's like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, okay, if that's the number drawn, so if divisible by 10, then $1 million. Okay, so if a random number is picked and the number is divisible by 10, it's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, then you get $1 million. Now, what option are you going to pick? Well, obviously the game you want to play is game A, right? The reason is because you're more likely to win that $1 million. Okay, now what's Rhoda trying to say here? Rhoda's saying this, and this is going to be dependent on the next chapter. If Christianity is more likely to be true than Islam, then you're more likely to win that heaven and avoid the hell. Okay, and so let's say Christianity were 50% likely to be true, and Islam were 10% likely to be true. Suppose we got it down to those odds. Okay, well then obviously you should commit to living the Christian life. Okay, because that's how you're going to maximize your expected utility. Same for in this case. Picking an even number versus playing game A versus playing game B. Okay, now it might even be that Christianity is 50% true and Islam is like 40% likely to be true. Even then, that's like saying picking an even number or picking a number divisible by 4, like 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, right? Even then, you're going to pick game A. So really what matters then is if these all are a wash, okay, then the game you should play is the one, okay, that has the greater likelihood of being true. Okay, so the point Rhoda's making is not all religions are the same. Okay, there's going to be different plausibilities to which religion is true. Now you might say, well, how can he just say that, right? How can he just say that Christianity is more likely to be true? Well, that's going to be part 2 of the book. Now here's something, since Rhoda doesn't focus much on hell, the hell part is important. So we could say, okay, so here's how to make things a little more accurate. Let's say if you pick game A, play game A, if an even number comes up, okay, so I'm telling you a new scenario now. At game A, if an even number comes up, you win $1 million. And if an odd number comes up, you lose $1 million. That's kind of like going to hell. Okay. Game B, if a number divisible by 10 comes up, you get $1 million. Any other number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 19, 21, 22, 23, etc. If any of those numbers come up, then you lose $1 million. Okay. That would be like the equivalent to hell if you're wanting to avoid hell. Okay. So I think this is the easier way to think about it. Rhoda's boxes are a little bit more messy, but so that's what it's going to come down to. Now, if you look at the handout, the next question I ask is, so yeah, it's going to come down to which religion is most plausible. Now, before this class, you might have thought, well, all religions, they're basically equal. They're all just making these claims. But like we talked about, early in the class, and I'll say again now, that's not quite the case. I mean, it would be funny if all of our evidence equally supported all the views, all the different religions. Okay, we have different evidences coming up each day, and Rhoda mentions different categories of which a religion could be true. Different categories of evidences for a religion. So how does Rhoda suggest that one conclude that one religion is considerably more credible than another? I'm reading from the handout. What sort of things does he appeal to? On page 68. Some religions might be supported better philosophically. Some might have better scientific evidence. So some religions actually just flatly contradict what we know from science. If any religion said, for example, that the earth was flat, then we would probably want to knock out that religion as being very unlikely. Historical appeals, if the religion makes claims about history that are in conflict with what we know about history, that'd be a problem. If a religion says we should kill people, enslave people, and so on, then it would have moral issues. Okay, so Rhoda is saying these are the sorts of issues we want to appeal to in assessing different religions. And evidence is going to matter. One thing I hope we get out of this class is we don't just think, oh, all the religions are basically the same, without really giving it a careful investigation. What we want to do is examine the arguments. Okay, now one thing Rhoda does say that he's going to do is he's going to give arguments for Christianity being at least 50% likely to be true. Now, if that's true, then the other religions all have to divide up the rest of that 50% so that they're going to all be less than 50% likely to be true. Okay, and he says, well, I don't have to. Well, he says, one, the book would be too long if he investigated every single religion. But if he does make a good case that Christianity is greater than 50% likely to be true, that automatically follows that the rest are going to be less than 50% likely to be true. Is that a good response? Well, that could be up to be discussed in the discussion board. All right, so that's the many gods objection.